On your Thursday episode of Locked On Raptors, we take a little check-in on the Raptors rookies who are playing a lot these days. What are they now? What will they be next year? And what about 4 or 5 years from now? All coming up on today's show. Thanks for hanging.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Thursday, April the 3rd. I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 11 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on Blue Sky. You can also find the show on Instagram, and you can join us in the Locked On Raptors Discord server. Link in the description of the podcast. Come hang out. Great place to come talk ball among friends. It's our great little listener community. Of course, you can also support the daily Locked On Raptors newsletter. QR code on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. Link in the description of the podcast. If you're listening on audio, you can drop your email in the bar and you will get my fresh, hot, piping emails 5 days a week talking about your local basketball team. Katie Hind, a League at Large pieces 4 times a week. Michael Shear, basketball poetry every Thursday. That's today. Go check it out. It's 100% free. There's no reason not to. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. And let's get to it on today's show. We're talking rookies, baby. The Toronto Raptors take on the Portland Trailblazers tonight. There will be no Emmanuel Quickley. There will be no Jakob Poeltl. There may or may not be Scotty Barnes. And so, as has been the case for much of the last month and a half, a whole lot of rookies are going to get some run. And with the season winding down, with the book nearly being written on the first seasons of Jacoby Walter, Jamal Shead, Jonathan Mogbo and Jamison Battle, the 4 Js, if you will, I just wanted to kind of do a bit of a status update on where they're at in their development, how it's gone this year, what they'll be on next year's team in all likelihood, where things track over the next 4 or 5 years in their development, who will be in the league, who will not, et cetera, et cetera. We'll get to Shed, we'll get to Mogbo, we'll get to Battle coming up later. But I think we should start with the guy who I think has kind of pretty clearly cemented himself as the best Raptors rookie, the Raptors rookie with the highest upside, the Raptors rookie that I'm certainly dreaming on the most right now. And that's Jacoby Walter, who obviously we know. And I talked about him a little bit on yesterday's show when I got into the Walter Emmanuel Quickley combination in the backcourt and why I'm bullish on their potential fit long-term. But look, it was a tough start for Walter. He had a really tough, training camp, having not played. He was injured, right? He had the AC joint thing, comes in late, picks up the sort of the thread of the season a month in or so, and really struggled out of the gate. But over the last 40 or so games, since he's kind of gotten acclimatized here, he's looked pretty damn good for a rookie. And in this rookie class, I think he's looked, not as impressive as, say, a Zachary Risacher or a Stephon Castle, but kind of in that next tier of guys, the next, the second or third tier of rookies this season. I think Walter is comfortably in there. And I think long term, I think there's a lot of reason to feel pretty good about having him as part of the mix for this team going forward. A tail of the tape on this year for Walter: 49 games played, 15 starts, 21 minutes a game, 8.4 points, 3 boards, 1.5 assists, 0.8 steals, 34% from deep. It's come up a little bit, of course. It was a rough start for him. He was in the mid-20s at the very beginning. He's steadily brought that up. That 5 of 5 a couple nights ago in Chicago certainly helped matters a little bit. 3.5 attempts from deep a game, 45% on his twos. That's going to have to come up for sure. 51.5% true shooting overall, closer to 54 if you take out the first 10 games, which I think is fair to do considering it was his first 10 games as a rookie and he was joining the party late. His shot chart, pretty interesting stuff. 33% of his looks come at the rim. That's very interesting for a guy who in college was a free throw machine, a guy who had a lot of downhill force and energy getting to the rim. Nice that that's carried over to the NBA. He is only shooting 48% at the rim still. Talked about that number a couple times this week. It's not great. It's got to come up. No doubt about it. Like, that's a swing skill for him. But if it can, then there's a 3-level scorer burgeoning here with Jacoby Walter, with the 3-point shooting, with the pull-up juice he's had from the mid-range where he's been quite effective, pulling up from 18 feet, kind of, that 1-2 dribble pull-up, getting into it smoothly. That's been a really interesting part of his game this season. He's near 50% on those, has been, maybe come down a little bit lately, but he's been high 40s all season long on those pull-up twos. And yeah, I just think there's some stuff to be refined here. There's some edges to sand down. But like a lot of the stuff that he's doing just seems conducive to winning basketball. Again, I thought Jacoby Walter coming in kind of was gunner pilled. I thought he had like Hooper brain energy coming in. And I think that's maybe the reputation he carried coming out of Baylor. But he seems way more of like a high feel, do what I need to be doing, do what I'm asked type of player than I thought he was going to be. And if you look at the way his shot distribution looks, like he's a very modern player. Again, 33% of his shots come at the rim. 15% of his looks come from the corners. That's a nice clip. He's in the top quarter percentile in terms of frequency from both of those spots, the two highest value spots on the floor to be taking shots from. He's been, again, I think as like a little things guy as a rookie, you see the hustle plays, you see the offensive rebounding crashing, you see the defense. I think there's a lot of potential there with the way his footwork and his sort of slitheriness fighting over screens and things like that has been on display. I think there's a lot here, a lot of two-way potential, a lot of, stuff that kind of points towards just a really effective guy who can help you win basketball games. As far as next year's role, I think he probably is the best shot of all the Raptors rookies of like closing games next year. Not every game, of course. And obviously a lot is going to depend here on what the team looks like. RJ Barrett, I don't like bringing up the RJ Barrett trade thing because people get mad about it, but like it's a thing. He's easily the most, likely to be moved of the main five guys on this team because that's the contractual situation the Raptors find themselves in. They're not going to trade Jakob Poeltl, I think, right now. He's very valuable and really good and on a cheap deal. You've got Quickly going into year 2 of a 5-year deal. I think he's perfectly well paid for what he does and what he has done since he got healthy. My hunch is that around the league, there's maybe less appetite to take on a 4-year deal of Quickly after the year that he's had with the injuries and things like that. Scotty Barnes going on the max. I don't think he's going anywhere, and he might not be able to trade him for a substantial return after the season he's had. And you just signed Brandon Ingram. You're not trading him. And so if it comes down to a tax consideration and you need to make a move, which again, I think they should just pay the tax. That's what I want them to do. But if the powers that be say, hey, we can't pay the tax, Barrett's going to be the guy who moves. If he does move, then I think things get really interesting with Jacoby Walter. My guess is they go into the season with, Grady Dick probably having like a slight edge in the fight for the starting 2-guard spot. But I think there's a real chance that Walter wins that, if not in training camp, then at some point during the season next year. And then, yeah, he's closing a bunch of games. If Barrett's on the team, I still think there will be reason to close games with him. Whether it's, maybe you have situations where Scotty Barnes is playing the 5 in a certain matchup and Jakob Poeltl's not closing, as has happened in the past when the Raptors have played close games that were high leverage back when Jakob Poeltl first got traded for, whether it's he's in for RJ Barrett because he's having an off night, whatever it might be. I think Walter of the Raptors rookies just kind of has the most obvious set of skills that we would be conducive to being on the floor in close high leverage games. Overall, he's going to be a bench guy next year. He's in most outcomes here. Again, the RJ thing kind of changes things, the dynamics, but I'm banking on RJ being back at this point. Seems like I don't know. I just don't know if that's a trade the Raptors want to make, like politically at the moment. Not, in terms of global trade war, just in terms of like, he's a really cool guy that everyone seems to like to root for on top of the global trade war. And maybe that's a part of it. I don't know. Either way, I do think, again, he's going to be a bench guy. If he does, I think he's got a very good chance of being like the leading scorer off the bench next season. Really into the idea of like Walter, Grady Dick, Ochai Agbaji as a 2-3-4 in some smaller, more shooting heavy lineups next season. You run Jamal Shead as the point guard with those looks. Maybe you throw Jakob Poeltl in there or Scotty at the 5 or something to kind of make those lineups sing. I think there's a lot of interesting potential there. I just think Walter's going to be in the mix a lot next season. I think he's going to be considered, 6th or 7th man on this team by the time all is said and done at the end of his second year. Obviously, he's got to stay healthy. He's got to stay on the floor. There's got to be, linear development of some degree here. It's not always linear. Of course, there's ups and downs, but if he can build upon this year and kind of make good on a lot of the flashes he's shown, there's a real regular rotation player here in Jacoby Walter as early as next season. 4 or 5 years from now, a lot is going to depend on the interior finishing stuff. That's the big sort of hang up for me right now. He's got to get stronger. He's got to finish through contact. He's got to get back to his ways of being a high free throw rate guy. He's taken nearly 2 free throws a game this season in limited minutes. That's not terrible. You got to build on that, of course. I do love what he brings to the table, though, as like a secondary attacking / 3-point shooting a little bit of creativity type of guy. I don't think he's ever going to run 100 pick and rolls for you. He's not going to be your lead guard, but I think there's a way here for Walter to find himself in the starting lineup in 4 or 5 years down the line and just being like a really additive piece to have on the floor. It doesn't take anything off the table defensively, can go guard ones and twos for you pretty capably. Maybe quickly struggling with the guy, you want to throw some more length on him. There's Walter for you at 6'5" with the longer arms and the good footwork and the speed and the slitheriness and all of that stuff. I think the 3-point shooting, he's been at 41% over the last, I think since January 31st, that's 22 games he's played. That's really exciting stuff. Like that is going to travel. That's going to play. And if he can be a high 30s 3-point shooter while also being a good defensive player who can make a move off the catch and keep the sequence going, that's a starting level player in all likelihood as he progresses and gets stronger and grows into being more than the, frail 20-year-old he currently is. I love how he plays. I love that he doesn't get sped up. I love that he kind of keeps guys off kilter with head fakes and pump fakes and things like that. A nice sort of a range of stutter steps and slow down and stuff that really, I think, just adds a lot of refinement to his game on top of all the little things he does. Worst case, I think he probably ends up as like a really nice 6-man for this team down the line. I'm big on Walter, man. And I think, if you're looking at this team 3-4 years down the line and he is a starter and he's like a third or fourth option for you, I don't think that's off the table as a potential outcome here for Walter. I think maybe you could have had a little more skepticism early on in the season when things weren't going well and he just could not hit anything to save his life. But all that little stuff, the stuff that keeps you on the floor, that keeps you in the good graces of coaches, it's going to give you the runway to be on the floor until those threes start to fall. And they're starting to fall now. And I'm really, really fascinated by what his development curve is going to look like over the next couple of years here. And I think they got to play him a lot. I think he's going to be a big part of what they're doing next year. We're going to come back on the other side, talk about Jamal Shead, who might be the sort of going favorite as like most beloved Raptors rookie, considering what he's done, considering this franchise's history with cool small point guards. We'll get into his season, what comes next for him, and why I think he might just be a really damn steady backup point guard for as long as he wants to be. We'll get to that coming up in just one sec. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NCAA tournament is winding down on both the men's and women's sides, and FanDuel is giving you a chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. Maybe you think Paige Beckers is going to do it for UConn as the underdog 2 seed against all the 3 other 1 seeds on the women's side of things. Maybe on the men's side of things, you are fully in the tank for Cooper Flagg and Kaman Malawash and Con Knipple with Duke. Maybe you, like me, are all of a sudden a Duke basketball enjoyer. It's crazy, but that's where we are. If you have a hunch, you want to throw down some money on a favorite to win, to go and cut down the nets on the men's and women's sides this weekend, you can go do that over at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com to get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. FanDuel is the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. Back at it here on your Thursday edition of Locked On Raptors, talking about rookies, baby. Of course, it's been fun to talk about rookies all year long for the Raptors. The Raptors with only 1 first-round pick last year, no higher than 19th, 2 second rounders. You get in an undrafted free agent in Jamison Battle, who's made his way and got an NBA deal out of it. This is, I do think we have to say, this is not the 2016 draft, I don't think, for the Raptors. Like, I would be surprised if any of these guys become as good as peak Pascal or even peak Fred VanVleet. Both of those guys made all-star teams. I don't know if we have an all-star in the midst here, but as far as like cheap, affordable, rotation level players, the Raptors might have gotten themselves 3 or 4 here if things break right. I think at minimum 2. As far as rotation guys for the next little bit here as this team builds towards something. And one of those guys that I feel very good about is Jamal Shead. Just kind of a backup point guard, not someone who's like driving winning this year so far, but that's life as a rookie point guard. I think that's going to improve as the years go on because rookie point guards always get absolutely bludgeoned when they're on the floor. Overall, 6.9 points, 1.5 boards, 4 assists, 18.8 minutes a game. He was, of course, a nominee for Rookie of the Month in March. That's nice. It's not anything great, but it's something. 32.5% from 3. That's falling off a little bit here. He was in that 34-35% range for a bit. It's kind of tailed off over the last month or so. And that's the swing skill here, right? If Jamal Shead has designs on being anything more than a very good backup point guard, if he wants to ever become a starter in the NBA, the three-point shooting is just going to have to be better. It's the swing skill here, as it is with all guards, right? He's down to 35-ish% on all catch and shoot threes. That's not ideal, though he is at 44% from the corners. That's very good. You're happy to see that. Struggling from above the break, not ideal. If he has any designs, again, on being a starter, the pull-up is going to have to be much better than 25% on very low volume. Like, that's the shot that makes point guards into starters and good point guards into stars and all of this. It's the shot that makes careers. It's not going to be any different for Jamal Shead. But I also don't think, like, if your bar for Jamal Shead is just be a good backup point guard for many years, which I think for a 45th overall pick, a 4-year college player, I think that's a perfectly wonderful outcome to shoot for the 45th overall pick. I don't think he needs to be like a dead-eye three-point shooter for that to happen. He's got enough other stuff going on that solid backup point guard can totally be in his range of outcomes, even if he's never a 37, 38, 39% three-point shooter. He's got to be probably better than the 32.5 he's been this season on the whole. Again, there have been stretches where he's looked really good, and I think, it's just like eye test wise. I wrote earlier this season in the newsletter about his shot mechanics and the sort of way he tends to miss. And this is not universal. Sometimes he hits shots when this mechanic is in play, but it does feel like he's kind of gotten away a little bit just from watching him anecdotally from, I think I wrote about this, right? Where when he misses, he kind of has this trail off with his right hand that kind of, I think, throws off the alignment of the shot. When he's been at his best, he's really kind of had this tight, compact follow-through delivery that has, really, I think, translated to better three-point shooting results. Like, there's got to be work on the mechanics. There's got to be making that more sort of muscle memory so he doesn't kind of fall back on that trail off. That's all part of it. But I do think he's got enough other stuff in the bag that it's not like his NBA career, like whether he's an NBA player or not, doesn't totally depend on him being a lights out shooter. He's a very good point of attack defender, I think. Obviously, it's been rough this year. He's gotten cooked a little bit, a little over aggressive. And obviously the fouling has been a serious problem for him. He just fouls all the damn time. I think that's the type of thing that is mostly tied to being a rookie. These are errors of commission. These are fouls because he hasn't gained a rep yet as a nasty point of attack guy. I still am going to bank on a guy who was the NCAA Defensive Player of the Year as a 6-foot guard. I believe that in the NBA, that point of attack stuff, especially in a defense that is like encouraging that stuff and putting it at the forefront of what their identity is, I think that's going to kind of rein in a little bit, and he's going to end up being an above average point of attack defender. That's great. I think he's a very good passer. We know about the assist totals, four assists a game. He's like fourth among all rookies in assists this year. Fourth among all bench players in assists. I think he might be near the top among just rookies outside of Isaiah Collier in terms of just total assists. That's great. I think with the playmaking, it's not all just sort of Darko Rajakovic assist farming either. I think he's a creative passer. The live dribble stuff, taking a pick and roll, getting downhill, skipping it to the corner, like all pretty basic point guard reads, but stuff he's very good at it. He makes really nice reads. He makes really nice passes right to the shooter's pocket. I think he can kind of work on the pick and roll craft a little bit, the bounce pass, the pocket pass, the lob up high, all that stuff. That's maybe been lacking from his pass package this year, but I think he's just got a lot of vision as a passer. And I think that is a thing that's going to keep him on the floor. He's got that floater working well for him. He gets to the rim really well. He's got that quick first step. I think, he's got to finish better at the rim, of course, as everybody does when you're a 6-foot guard, probably. It's always an area where there can be some improvement because it's hard to finish at the rim when you're a 6-foot guard. But I think all of these little components of his game make it so that I feel pretty good that he's going to stick in the league in some capacity going forward. And again, I don't think he's ever going to be a starter. I think he can be the kind of guy who can fill in and you don't feel terrible if he's starting, if your point guard's hurt for, a week or two here and there, half a season, maybe less so. But next year, I think he's going to just be their backup point guard full time behind Emmanuel Quickley. I think he's going to play probably a similar load that he's taken this year, 18.8 minutes a game, like 18 to 20. That feels pretty safe to guess here. Maybe a little bit less if Quickley kind of scales up his minutes total. Maybe it's 15 to 18, something like that. But I think He's going to get a similar minutes load. I just think he's probably going to be more effective with like fewer rookie warts kind of seeping through for him. And, maybe he's not winning you huge minutes, but I think he can hold serve for you. And I think that is kind of what you want out of a second unit guard. Do I think he's going to close games for them next year? Not really. Like if they're playing competitive close games, don't think he'd be part of the mix. And there's every possibility he's just like not a playoff player, right? It's really hard to be a playoff player. It's really difficult to be one of the 7 or 8 trusted guys in a postseason rotation. I don't really think that's in Shead's future, but 4 or 5 years from now, I would not be surprised if we are talking about him in very much the same terms that we'll be talking about him next year. Just rock steady backup point guard, really good guy to have around. He seems just like a real source of energy and unity and leadership within the room. He gets rave reviews from everybody he seems to come in contact with. Again, I don't think you're ever going to close super important games with him unless it's a specific matchup. You need him out there to go harangue an opposing ball handler who's killing you or something like that. But that's not the bar that every player needs to hit to be successful. For a second round pick, the 45th pick in the draft, if you can just be a steady backup who you're happy to have on the floor, running your second unit, and can fill in a pinch as a starter, I think you're perfectly thrilled about that. And, you might want some more guard play to, kind of throw into the mix alongside Shead and Quickly. I think that's fair. Maybe a guy like Walter becomes a guy who can be an offset, can have the ball in his hands once in a while. Maybe they draft someone like Jeremiah Fears in the draft this summer, and that, kind of changes where Shead fits in. Maybe makes it more important that he figures out the catch and shoot stuff so he can work off ball more effectively. But I have a hard time thinking he's not going to be one of those classic dudes who just kind of hangs around the league for a while. Your Anthony Carter type, your Derek Martin types, your, if we're going back to like fun former Raptors backup guards, that's the kind of guy I see Shead kind of molding into. And again, for the 45th pick in the draft, if he can be your 8th or 9th man going forward for a handful of years, that's a wonderful success in the draft. And if he's damn likable while he's doing it and throwing down cool, huge yams as a 6-foot guy, as he has over the last little bit, even better. We'll come back on the other side, close things out, get into Jonathan Mogbo and Jamison Battle. Maybe the two less sure things among the Raptors rookie group. Lots of things they got to work on in order to stick around long term. I'm, of course, a huge believer in Jonathan Mogbo, and I'm pot committed at this point. We'll get into Mogbo, what he's got to do, where he fits in next year, and Battle, of course, as well, coming up in just 1 second. Today's show is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Daylight savings snuck up on us again. And if you're feeling that lost hour of sleep still weeks later, 5 Hour Energy has your back. The extra sunshine means more time for fun, but sometimes you need a little boost to power through. I'll tell you right now, sometimes I got these days where I'm working during the day. I got the day job going, doing the podcast, and I got to go to a Raptors game at night. And sometimes I'm just exhausted for that Raptors game and I need a little boost. Sometimes it's a coffee, but a 5 Hour Energy, it's a great way to do it if I'm not feeling like going insane. Coffee later in the day can kind of make me feel nuts. I've always found 5 Hour Energy just kind of the nice right amount of kick without making me feel like I'm going to lose my mind. I've had 5 Hour Energy a lot as sort of a crutch for myself back in the day during school, things like that. Staying up late to write papers the night before because I'm a bad procrastinator. A 5 Hour Energy is a wonderful thing for you to try out if you need that extra boost during your day. Head to 5hourenergy.com to find over 15 flavors to choose from, including watermelon, blue raspberry, and peach mango. You can even build your own 12-pack or 24-pack. Deliver it right to your door. Need one now? Grab a 5 Hour Energy at your local grocery store or convenience store. They're everywhere. Stock up today and stay energized. Closing things out here on your Thursday edition of Locked On Raptors. Talking some rookies, baby, as we get into the two guys who probably have the most to work on, the most to add to the mix in order to stick in the NBA long term. We'll start with my muse, my guy, the dude to whom I've hitched my wagon, the dude with whom I will go down with the damn ship, Jonathan Mogbo, who's had some real high highs this year and some less impressive lows over the course of the year. Very up and down. But for me, he's still quite a curiosity. Defensive potential, off the damn charts. Deflections wizard. ISO defense star in the making, I think, if he can stay on the floor offensively. The number of highlight reel defensive stops he's had this year. We kind of stopped doing the Mo Bingo bit from earlier in the year, where I had a bingo card, if you're not familiar, with faces of various stars on the around the league that Mogbo had stonewalled in a defensive possession or two. Stopped doing that because he went to the G League and it's not quite been the same, and they're not playing any good teams down the stretch. But it's something where he still had moments against Tyrese Maxey, blocking threes from Tyrese Maxey, a handful of possessions, completely flummoxing Anthony Edwards, even Shea Gilgeous-Alexander picking his pocket, forcing really tough shots and misses. Like, some of the best offensive players in the game have run into the Mogbo wall and been stopped in their tracks this year. And for me, like, when I'm looking at rookies, I'm looking at flashes, things that can be sort of, they're little things that are flashes of what a guy can do that you hope he can start to do more often as he acclimatizes to the NBA. I have very little concern about the defense with Jonathan Mogbo. I think he can switch. I think he's long enough that he can contest shots, as like a drop big, even though he's not huge. Those arms go for days. He's really quick. He's got good recovery time. He's still learning the intricacies of playing center. And I do think center, honestly, is where he's going to end up. I think the wing dream with him is a little far-fetched, and we'll get into why. A lot of it's due to the offense. And I think if he is going to improve on offense, it's in center things that I think he's probably got the best shot. The vertical lob finishing, which I think we've seen some nice signs of late. The short roll play, we'll get into that. Like, there's a lot to fix and improve upon here offensively, but you're adding those offensive additions onto a really solid defensive base, like a really high-end defensive prospect here. Offensively, again, this is where his career is going to be made. 1 point per shot attempt per clean the glass this season. That is not good. That is in the 8th percentile among bigs in the NBA. Not what you want, especially not after he led the West Coast Conference last year at effective field goal percentage while shooting 64% from two, just 48% from two this season. That's not good enough. He shot 59% at the rim, which isn't like miserable for a guard, but he's a big / forward type, and he takes 60% of his shots at the rim. Got to be better than that. The 3-point shot, it's been an interesting kind of adventure this year. He started off quite well, hit some, and was like, "Ooh, okay, this is a thing," and it's kind of tailed off. 28% from three this year on 1 attempt per game. Had some moments, had some hot nights, had some really, really bad misses as well. I don't love the way the jump shot looks. That's something that maybe if they can get a shot doctor to kind of rework things, maybe that's a worthwhile investment here. But I'll still say, like, 28% on 1 attempt a game is way better than 0% on 2 attempts in his entire college career. Moving in the right direction, I suppose, if you're kind of looking through rose-colored glasses here. This might be the single biggest test of the Raptors' developmental chops at this point is, can you get Jonathan Mogbo to knock down cursory threes in the corner? And again, I'm not totally betting on it, right? I think if he is going to improve, it is going to be as a more sort of small energy type big who can play in switchable lineups, elongate some lineups for you, maybe just offer a different look. And again, I don't worry about the 6'6", 6'7" height. I think the arms make up for it, the size, the athleticism, the way he's mobile and covers space, like all that to me is fine, especially because backup centers around the NBA suck. There's no good backup centers. But yeah, and I just think if you're looking at his package, the things that can be improved, the short roll stuff that big men do, he's a very good passer. I think we've seen that on display a whole lot this year. Like, I really like the passing vision, and we know he can dunk. Whether he can kind of get that floater from the place it's at right now, where it's like really heavy-handed, doesn't look great, not great touch on it. Can he refine that at all? Can he find a way to finish at the rim when he's not dunking it? Can he use that sort of quick, left-right crossover that he has in close quarters against, bigger players that he's kind of burned a few guys with this year to greater effect? Like, that's a guy who can be the sort of middle guy in a zone, a guy who can work in short roll if quickly or Brandon Ingram is going to see 2 of the ball and pick and roll. Like, those are the ways I think Jonathan Mogbo becomes an effective NBA player. I don't think he's going to be a starter one day. It's a lot to ask for a guy who's this far away from being super effective night to night. But like, nice rotation, energy player who, again, kind of gives more length to some of your lineups, just as this, dose of athleticism. If you really need a stop, you can throw him out there and throw him on a guy, or, if a guy's really killing you on the wing, maybe he can be your go-to option if you can dot more shooting around him. That's where I kind of see his future in the NBA being, 9th, 10th man, maybe 8th man type of thing, if things really break right. A rotation player in the regular season who's got sort of, breaking case of emergency type skills in higher leverage games. I would say he's probably, as much as I love Mogbo, he's probably the Raptors rookie who's most likely to not be in the league in 4 to 5 years' time. I think that's totally a fair way to read this. The defense is going to give him a shot, though. It's going to give him runway. we'll see if he can come along with the offensive stuff. But, as a nice key bench player, a cog in some effective lineups along with other starters, I do think it's still there for him. It's just going to be a big developmental undertaking for him and the franchise to see if they can get him there. Jamison Battle. Let's move on to him quickly to close things out here. What is he right now? It's, he's a really awesome story is what he is. He's an undrafted guy, comes in, shoots the lights out all year long, gets an NBA deal, awesome stuff. And he's going to have a couple of years now on this NBA deal to figure things out and see if he can kind of stick in the NBA long term. This season, 6.5 points, 2.5 boards, nearly an assist, 39.9% from deep, 58.2% true shooting, took 74.2% of all of his shots from 3-point range. Maybe you want a little more balance there, because this is the thing. Shooting can get you on the floor, no doubt about it. It can earn you some runway, earn you some time to figure things out. But eventually, you got to be able to do things other than just can stationary threes. It's not a league now. The league has gotten too modern. Offense has gotten too sophisticated. Defenses have gotten too smart. You can't just be a guy who is only taking threes. You have to do more. And for Jamison Battle, whether that's he figures out how to make stuff happen off the catches, he's going to start to see harder closeouts as a great shooter. Can he make stuff happen in that in between, the 1-2 dribble step, pull up? Can he get to the rim? Can he pass out of those situations, keep the sequence going? On defense, that's going to be a big thing too, right? He's 6'7". He, in theory, has the build to be a good defender. I think he can kind of get bullied around a little bit. He's not the most athletic guy in the world, not the strongest guy in the world, but maybe there's something there as like a passable defender. I mean, this is what turns you from, being this sort of 3-point shooting specialist who you toss in when you need some threes to being like a guy like Sam Hauser, for example, on the Celtics, where like solid defender, a guy who, bangs threes and also can hang in high leverage minutes because he's not getting pushed around defensively and he can do a little bit of other stuff. I mean, the Celtics just ask him to bang threes, essentially. He's very good at it. But you got to be able to do more than just hit wide open catch and shoot threes. It's a great way to get in the foot in the door. But once your foot is in the door, you got to start to show more reasons that, teams are going to, keep rolling you out there. I'd bet against him being part of like a coach's trusted 7 or 8 man playoff rotation one day. I don't think that's really in his future, but I do think, and of course he's an older guy too, right? He's 24 next month. He's further along his developmental track. It's probably unfair to think that he's going to make this substantial leap into like a no doubt every single night rotation guy. But as an 11th or 12th guy to have around, really nice player to have, especially as an undrafted free agent who you have on a cheap deal. Like everyone needs these types of guys to get through a season. He's going to help you win regular season games. And, probably similar to his role this year. I think next year he's going to be, that 11th or 12th guy. I think he probably is, going to get maybe a quicker call if they're getting zoned up and having a hard time breaking it, or, they're just having a rough shooting night. Maybe he gets a quicker sort of, hey, get in there, Jamison. Like he had some time this year, obviously away from the team because he was on the two-way for a while. I think he'll be just like a pretty trusted upon 11th or 12th guy. Helps you get through the regular season intact. And he's been on the floor in some pretty effective lineups too. He elongates lineups. He's big and he can shoot. Like there's going to be a place for him. Is it in the sort of core of a really good team down the line? I doubt it, because it's really hard for any undrafted guy to reach that status, but that doesn't take away from what he's done. It doesn't take away from that. I think he can be an effective player to have on a team that's trying to win regular season games. I do think this summer's draft is where you get more of the upside guy, right? Like we've talked a lot about dudes who are likely to be nice rotation guys, deeper bench pieces outside of Walter, who I think has starter upside for sure. This summer in the draft, that's where you get you're getting your best prospect in the door. You're getting someone who has hopefully some star upside or star potential, or like really good role player potential, whatever it might be, wherever you pick. That's the higher upside play. But I do think with the 2024 draft, the Raptors have established some functional depth, some depth that can help you survive a regular season, a thing this team really did not have coming into this season. The last few years, it was pretty grim. 7 or 8 guys you could count upon. And then even then, a couple of those guys were Precious Achiuwa sometimes, and you couldn't quite count on them either. And so they're in a better spot for what they've done in the 2024 draft. It's not the sexiest bunch of players in the world. I think it's probably most likely that 2 of the 4 end up being long-term NBA rotation players, because that's always the odds when you're dealing with later picks. But they've got a shot with all these guys. None of these guys are write-offs in the NBA by any means, which is a nice thing after 1 year of seeing them play pretty heavy minutes for a team that's asked a lot from their rookies. We're going to come back tomorrow And talking about Raptors Blazers, a game that will feature surely plenty of rookies as the Raptors aren't playing anybody, baby. So we'll talk about that, and we will send you off into the weekend. A little toxic positivity on Friday, as is always the case. We only got like 2 more of those left, and then we'll just be in the regular old off season. As I kind of need to retire the bit. I'm running out of ways to be toxically positive about this basketball team at the moment. We know where it's at, and we've kind of reached an understanding, I think, of where things are going from here. But either way, we'll have the penultimate Toxic Positivity Friday tomorrow. In the meantime, follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend, go to the newsletter, QR code on the screen, etc., etc. Link in the description of the podcast for the newsletter as well. Or if you want to join the Discord for free, be part of our listener family. And thanks so much for rocking with the show. We will talk to you again on Friday with another episode of Locked On Raptors. Bye-bye. I'm so bad.